the scream that tore through the evening air in Bozeman, Montana, was unlike anything Garrett Emerson had ever heard, and he had heard plenty during his 32 years riding the frontier. It was August 1882, and the sun hung low over the Gallatin Valley, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. He had been leading his horse toward the livery after 3 weeks on the trail when that sound pierced through the peaceful twilight, a desperate plea that seemed to claw its way up from the earth itself. Garrett stopped dead in his tracks, his hand instinctively moving to the colt at his hip. The scream came again, muffled but unmistakable, and it was coming from the direction of the Kensington property just beyond the edge of town. Everyone in Bozeman knew about Marcus Kensington, a bitter rancher whose wife had died 5 years back, leaving him alone with a daughter no one in town had seen in months. Folk whispered about it sometimes, the way she had just vanished from Sunday services and town gatherings, but in a place where people minded their own business to survive. No one had pressed the matter. But that scream changed everything. Garrett tied his horse quickly to a post and moved toward the property, his boots kicking up dust as he ran. The Kensington house was a weathered 2-story structure that had seen better days, with peeling paint and a porch that sagged like a broken promise. He followed the sound, which came not from the house but from somewhere behind it, near the old root cellar he could barely see in the fading light. "Help, please, someone help me." The voice was hoarse, desperate, and distinctly female. It echoed up from the wooden doors set at an angle into the hillside behind the house. Garrett reached the cellar doors and grabbed the rusted iron handles, pulling hard. They did not budge. A heavy chain had been wrapped around both handles and secured with a thick padlock that gleamed newer than anything else on the property. His blood ran cold. "I hear you," he called down through the crack between the doors. "Hold on now, please," came the weak reply. "Please get me out. I cannot breathe down here. There is no air." Garrett looked around frantically, his heart hammering. Breaking someone's lock meant trouble, potentially legal trouble, but leaving a woman trapped underground was not something his conscience would allow. He spotted a pile of old farming equipment near the barn and ran to it, grabbing a rusted pickaxe. The first swing against the padlock sent sparks flying. The second swing made the chain rattle. The third swing finally broke the lock clean through, and he threw the chains aside, wrenching the doors open. The smell hit him first, damp earth and stale air, and something worse, the scent of someone who had been trapped in the dark for far too long. He peered down into the blackness, his eyes struggling to adjust. A ladder descended into the void, and at the bottom he could barely make out a pale figure crumpled against the earthen wall. "I am coming down," Garrett said, already swinging himself onto the ladder. He descended quickly into the cool darkness, and when his boots hit the packed dirt floor, he could finally see her properly. She was rail thin, her dress torn and filthy, her long dark hair matted and tangled around her shoulders. But it was her eyes that struck him most, wide and blue and filled with a mixture of terror and hope that made his chest ache. She could not have been more than 25, maybe younger, and she was shaking violently despite the summer heat that had baked the ground all day. "Can you stand?" Garrett asked gently, extending his hand to her. "I think so," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the words. When she reached for his hand, he saw the bruises on her wrists, dark purple marks that spoke of chains or ropes. Rage flared hot in his gut, but he pushed it down, focusing on getting her out of this hole first. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled immediately. Garrett caught her before she fell, and without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he felt the sharp angles of her bones through the thin fabric of her dress. How long had she been down here? "I have got you," he said firmly. "Hold onto my neck." She obeyed, wrapping her arms weakly around him, and he began the difficult task of climbing the ladder one-handed while carrying her. It took all his strength and balance, but he managed it, emerging from the cellar into the cool evening air. She gasped when the breeze hit her face, and he felt her grip tighten on him. "That is it, breathe deep," he encouraged, setting her down gently on the grass a safe distance from the cellar. She sat there, gulping air like a drowning person finally reaching the surface. Garrett knelt beside her, studying her face in the twilight. She was beautiful despite the dirt and the fear, with delicate features and those striking blue eyes that seemed to see right through him. "What is your name, Lily?" she managed between breaths. "Lily Kensington." "How long were you down there, Lily?" Her eyes filled with tears. "3 days this time, maybe 4. I lose track when he puts me down there." Her voice broke completely on the last words, and she buried her face in her hands. This time, the words made Garrett see red. He looked toward the house, half expecting Marcus Kensington to come storming out, but the place remained silent and dark. "Where is your father now?" "In town," Lily said, wiping at her eyes with shaking hands. "He goes to the saloon every evening. He will be back soon, and if he finds you here, if he finds me out." The terror in her voice was palpable. "Then we need to go," Garrett said decisively. He stood and held out his hand again. "Can you walk if I help you?" "I do not have anywhere to go," Lily said, but she took his hand anyway, letting him pull her to her feet. She swayed dangerously, and he wrapped an arm around her waist to steady her. "You can worry about that later. Right now, we just need to get you away from here." He began walking her slowly toward the front of the property, supporting most of her weight as her legs remembered how to work. "My horse is just up the road. Do you think you can ride?" "I used to ride," Lily said softly. Before my mother died, before everything changed." They made it to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper who barely flicked an ear at the strange woman Garrett lifted into the saddle. Lily gripped the horn with white knuckles, and Garrett swung up behind her, wrapping one arm securely around her waist. "Where are we going?" she asked as he turned Copper away from the Kensington property. "The boarding house on Main Street. Mrs. Patterson runs it, and she is a good woman. She will give you a room and ask no questions tonight." He urged Copper into a gentle trot, feeling Lily lean back against his chest as though she no longer had the strength to sit upright on her own. The ride into the heart of Bozeman took only a few minutes, but Garrett spent every second of it acutely aware of the woman in his arms. She smelled of earth and fear, but underneath it, he caught hints of something sweeter, maybe lavender from some long-ago soap. Her hair brushed against his chin, and he felt protective in a way he had not felt since the war, when he had carried wounded men off battlefields. Mrs. Patterson was indeed a good woman, a widow in her 50s who took one look at Lily and immediately ushered them inside without a single question about the dirt-covered, half-starved girl Garrett brought to her doorstep. She settled Lily into a room on the second floor, promised to bring up hot water for a bath and some soup, and shooed Garrett out into the hallway. "Give the girl some privacy, Mr. Emerson," she said firmly but kindly. "You can check on her in the morning." Garrett nodded, though every instinct told him to stay close and make sure Lily was safe. But Mrs. Patterson was right. Lily needed food and rest and safety, not a strange cowboy hovering over her. He went downstairs and paid for a week's lodging in advance, then made his way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tom Wade was a grizzled man in his late 50s who had kept the peace in Bozeman for nearly 20 years. He listened without interruption as Garrett explained what he had found, his weathered face growing darker with each detail. "Marcus Kensington," Wade said heavily when Garrett finished. I have had my suspicions about that man for a while now. Folk have mentioned not seeing his daughter, but without proof. He stood and grabbed his hat from the peg on the wall. I will ride out there tonight and have a word with him. You willing to make a statement? I broke his lock and took his daughter, Garrett said evenly. I will stand by that decision in any court you want. Wade gave him a long look, then nodded. Something tells me there will not be much sympathy for Kensington once people hear the truth. You did right, Emerson. Now go get some rest. This is likely to get complicated. Garrett left the sheriff's office and walked through the quiet streets of Bozeman, but he did not go to his usual room above the saloon. Instead, he found himself back at the boarding house, sitting in the parlor where Mrs. Patterson found him an hour later. She is sleeping, the older woman reported, settling into the chair across from him. Poor thing ate half a bowl of soup and fell asleep in the bathtub. I got her cleaned up and into bed. She has bruises everywhere, Mr. Emerson. That man should hang for what he has done. The sheriff is handling it, Garrett said, though his hands clenched into fists on his knees. Mrs. Patterson studied him shrewdly. You planning to stick around, or are you going to ride off like you usually do? Garrett had indeed been planning to leave Bozeman in a day or two, heading south toward Wyoming where he had heard about work on a big ranch. But the thought of leaving Lily now, alone and vulnerable, made something twist painfully in his chest. I will stay a while, he heard himself say. Just to make sure she is all right. Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. I will have a room ready for you then, and Mr. Emerson, thank you for bringing her here. A lot of men would have looked the other way. Garrett stayed in the parlor long into the night, unable to sleep, unable to stop seeing Lily's terrified eyes staring up at him from that dark cellar. When he finally climbed the stairs to the room Mrs. Patterson had prepared, he paused outside Lily's door, listening for any sound of distress. He heard only silence, and he hoped that meant she was finally resting peacefully. The next morning, Garrett woke early and went downstairs to find Mrs. Patterson already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Is she awake? He asked. Not yet. Let her sleep as long as she needs. Mrs. Patterson handed him a cup of coffee. Sheriff came by about an hour ago. Said to tell you Marcus Kensington has been arrested. They found the cellar just like you described and evidence of other things too. Letters she had tried to write, asking for help. He had been keeping her prisoner for over a year. Garrett nearly dropped his coffee. A year. Ever since she refused to marry some wealthy rancher from Livingston that Kensington had his eye on for business reasons. The rancher did not want her anymore after she disappeared for a while, so Kensington punished her for ruining his plans. At least, that is what the sheriff pieced together from things he found in the house. Mrs. Patterson shook her head in disgust. There is evil in this world, Mr. Emerson, and sometimes it wears the face of a father. Garrett set down his coffee, no longer able to stomach it. He thought of his own father, a hard man but never cruel, and could not fathom the kind of twisted mind that would torture his own child. When she wakes, will you tell her I would like to speak with her? If she is willing. I will, Mrs. Patterson promised. It was late morning when Lily finally emerged from her room. Garrett was sitting in the parlor, pretending to read a newspaper but actually straining his ears for any sound from upstairs. When she appeared in the doorway, he nearly did not recognize her. Mrs. Patterson had found her a clean dress, a simple blue calico that matched her eyes, and her dark hair had been washed and brushed until it fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She was still too thin, still had purple shadows under her eyes, but she looked human again. She looked beautiful. Mr. Emerson, she said softly, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. Garrett stood quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. Miss Kensington, please sit down. Can I get you anything, Mrs. Patterson already fed me enough breakfast for 3 people, Lily said with a ghost of a smile as she settled onto the sofa. But thank you. She paused, her eyes finding his. And thank you for yesterday, for hearing me, for getting me out. I thought I was going to die down there this time. I am just glad I was there, Garrett said, sitting back down. He wanted to ask her so many questions, but he did not know where to start. Lily saved him the trouble. The sheriff came by this morning. He told me my father has been arrested. He said I will need to testify eventually, but that I am free now, truly free. Her voice caught on the last word, and she looked away quickly, blinking back tears. That must be overwhelming, Garrett said gently. I do not know what to do, Lily admitted, her composure cracking. I have no money. No family except for an aunt in Colorado I have not seen since I was a child. The house, the property, they are all in my father's name. I do not even know if I have a home anymore. I do not even know who I am anymore, if I am being honest. Garrett leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You are Lily Kensington, and you are a survivor. The rest you can figure out one day at a time. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Garrett felt something shift in the air between them. Why did you help me? You do not know me. You could have gotten in trouble or worse. My father could have come back while you were there. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, Garrett said simply. And as for not knowing you well, I would like to change that if you are willing. A faint blush colored Lily's pale cheeks. I would like that too. Over the following days, Garrett found excuses to stay in Bozeman. He took a job at the local stable, mucking stalls and tending horses, work that was beneath his skills as a top ranch hand but paid enough to cover his room and meals. Every evening he would sit with Lily in the boarding house parlor, and slowly, carefully, she began to tell him her story. She spoke of a childhood full of love, of a mother who sang while she cooked and a father who had seemed stern but fair. Then her mother had died of influenza, and something in Marcus Kensington had broken. He became obsessed with rebuilding the fortune he had lost in bad investments, and he saw his daughter as a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. When I refused to marry that rancher, he hit me for the first time, Lily said one evening, her voice flat with remembered pain. Then he locked me in my room. When I tried to escape through the window, he put me in the cellar for a week. After that, every time I did something he did not like, down I went. Sometimes for a day, sometimes for longer. He would throw down a little food and water, just enough to keep me alive and leave me in the dark. Garrett listened, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He wanted to find Marcus Kensington in his jail cell and make him suffer the way he had made Lily suffer, but he knew that would not help her. What she needed now was not vengeance but safety, stability, and someone who would listen without judgment. As the days turned into weeks, something blossomed between them. It started with shared glances and accidental touches, with the way Garrett would bring her wildflowers he had picked on his walks, and the way Lily would save him the best biscuits from breakfast. It grew with conversations that stretched late into the night, with laughter that came more easily as Lily began to heal, with the comfortable silence that fell between them when words were not necessary. I have not felt this way in so long, Lily confessed one September evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. Happy, I mean. Safe. Like I am a real person again and not just something to be locked away. You were always a real person, Garrett said fiercely. Your father tried to break you, but he did not succeed. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. Lily turned to him, her blue eyes shining in the lamplight spilling from the window. I feel strong when I am with you. You make me believe I can have a real life again. Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Her fingers were delicate but no longer trembling, and when she laced them through his larger, calloused ones, his heart felt like it might burst. "You can have anything you want, Lily, any life you want. You just have to decide what that is." "What if what I want is you?" The words came out as a whisper, brave and terrified all at once. Garrett had known he was falling for her, had known it since that first moment he saw her in the cellar and felt that fierce protective instinct rise up in him. But hearing her say those words, knowing she felt the same pull he did, made everything suddenly, perfectly clear. He cupped her face in his free hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Then you can have me, Lily, for as long as you want me." She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Promise me something, Garrett. Promise me you will never lock me anywhere. Promise me you will never try to control me or make me into something I am not." "I promise," Garrett said solemnly. "I do not want to control you, Lily. I want to see you fly. I want to watch you become whoever you are meant to be." She opened her eyes then, and the trust he saw there humbled him. Slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a question more than a demand, and when she kissed him back, winding her arms around his neck and pressing closer, it felt like coming home. The trial happened in late October, a cold day when the mountains were already dusted with snow. Lily testified calmly and clearly about her father's abuse, and Garrett watched from the gallery, ready to storm the stand if Marcus Kensington so much as looked at her wrong. But the broken man in chains who sat at the defendant's table barely resembled the monster who had locked his daughter in the dark. He looked old and defeated, and when the judge sentenced him to 20 years in territorial prison, he did not even flinch. Lily cried afterward, but they were complicated tears, grief and relief and anger all mixed together. Garrett held her outside the courthouse while curious onlookers whispered and stared, and he did not care one bit what they thought. Let them talk. Lily was free, truly and completely free, and that was all that mattered. In the aftermath of the trial, decisions had to be made. The Kensington property was seized to pay her father's debts, but Lily said she did not want it anyway. "Too many bad memories," she explained to Garrett as they walked through Bozeman's quiet streets one evening. "I want to start fresh somewhere new, somewhere that is mine, not his. Have you thought about where you might want to go?" Garrett asked, though the question made his stomach knot with anxiety. He had been in Bozeman for 2 months now, the longest he had stayed anywhere since the war ended, and he realized he did not want to leave, not if it meant leaving Lily. "Actually," Lily said, stopping and turning to face him, "I have been thinking about that a lot. My aunt in Colorado wrote back. She said I could come stay with her, and she even sent money for the train ticket." She paused, biting her lip nervously. "But I do not want to go to Colorado, Garrett. No, no, because you are here." She took both his hands in hers, looking up at him with those blue eyes that had haunted his dreams since the day he met her. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know I probably should not say this so soon after everything that has happened, but I love you, Garrett Emerson. You saved my life, and then you showed me how to live again. I do not want to go anywhere without you." Garrett felt like he could not breathe, like the whole world had narrowed down to just this moment, this woman, this chance at something real and lasting. "I love you too, Lily. I think I have loved you since I heard you screaming and knew I would do anything to get you out of that cellar." He squeezed her hands gently. "Come with me." "Where?" "Anywhere, everywhere. I have been drifting for years, taking jobs here and there, never putting down roots because I was not sure what I was looking for. But I found it, Lily. I found you. So let us go somewhere new together. Let us start over in a place where no one knows your past and we can build whatever kind of life we want." "Like where?" Lily asked, but she was smiling now, that radiant smile that transformed her face. I heard there is good land opening up in the Bitterroot Valley. Small farms, nothing fancy but honest work and good soil. We could get married and file a homestead claim, build a house together, raise some horses maybe or cattle, whatever you want. Get married, Lily repeated, her smile growing wider. Is that a proposal, Mr. Emerson? Garrett laughed, and right there on the main street of Bozeman, Montana, with the late October wind biting at their faces and the mountains standing eternal in the distance, he dropped to one knee. Lily Kensington, you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Will you marry me? Yes, Lily said immediately, pulling him back to his feet and kissing him soundly. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Mrs. Patterson stood up as a witness, crying happy tears and fussing over Lily's borrowed white dress. Sheriff Wade came too, shaking Garrett's hand and telling him he was getting himself a fine woman. Lily had no family there, but the handful of townspeople who attended made up for it with their warmth and well wishes. When Garrett kissed his bride at the altar, sealing their vows before God and witnesses, he felt something settle deep in his soul that had been restless for as long as he could remember. They left Bozeman the next morning on a wagon Garrett had bought with his savings, loaded with supplies for their new life. Lily sat beside him on the bench seat, her hand tucked into his, and she did not look back once as they rolled out of town. They were headed west into the Bitterroot Valley, toward a future they would build together from nothing but love and determination, and the absolute certainty that they belonged to each other. The journey took a week, following rough roads through mountain passes that were already threatening to close for winter. They camped under the stars, huddled together in blankets against the cold, and Garrett marveled at how naturally Lily adapted to life on the trail. She cooked over the campfire without complaint, laughed when their wagon got stuck in mud and she had to help push, and fell asleep each night curled against his chest, as though she had always belonged there. "Tell me about the homestead," Lily said one night as they lay watching the stars through a gap in the trees. "What do you see when you imagine it?" "A little cabin," Garrett said, stroking her hair gently. "Just one room to start, but solid and warm. A barn for the horses and maybe some chickens. A garden where you can grow vegetables. And in a few years, when we have saved enough, we will add on. More rooms for the children we will have, a proper parlor, maybe even a porch where we can sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over the mountains." "Children," Lily murmured, and he felt her smile against his shoulder. "I like the sound of that. How many are you planning on, Mr. Emerson?" "As many as you are willing to give me, Mrs. Emerson." She laughed, that bright, clear sound that Garrett loved more than anything. "I will give you a whole houseful if you keep looking at me the way you do." "And how is that?" "Like I am the most precious thing in the world." Garrett tilted her face up to his and kissed her softly. "That is because you are." They reached the Bitterroot Valley in early November, just as the first real snow began to fall. The land office in the small settlement of Stevensville helped them file their claim, 160 acres of virgin land nestled in a valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising protectively on all sides. It was everything Garrett had hoped for and more. The first winter was hard. They lived in the wagon while Garrett worked from sunup to sundown building their cabin, his breath frosting in the cold air as he cut logs and notched them into place. Lily helped however she could, carrying stones for the fireplace and mixing mud to chink the gaps between logs. When her hands grew too cold to work, Garrett would stop and warm them between his own, kissing her fingertips until she laughed and swatted him away, telling him to get back to work. They moved into the cabin on Christmas Eve. Just the four walls and a roof with a dirt floor and a fireplace that smoked something awful until Garrett figured out how to adjust the flue. But it was theirs, built with their own hands, and when they lay on their bedroll that night in front of the crackling fire, Lily cried happy tears. "I never thought I would have this," she whispered to Garrett in the darkness. "A home that is really mine, a husband who loves me, a future I can look forward to instead of dread." "You deserve all of it and more," Garrett said, pulling her closer. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." Spring came late to the Bitterroot Valley that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed their little corner of the world into something magical. Wildflowers bloomed in riots of color across their land, and Lily planted a garden with seeds they had brought from Bozeman. Garrett built a small barn and bought 2 good horses and a milk cow from a neighboring homesteader. They worked side by side, clearing rocks from fields and repairing fence lines, and every night they fell into bed exhausted but content. It was in late May when Lily told him she was expecting their first child. They were sitting by the creek after a long day's work, dangling their feet in the cold mountain water, and she just turned to him with that radiant smile and said, "We are going to need to add onto the cabin sooner than we thought." Garrett did not understand at first, but when comprehension dawned, he let out a whoop of joy that startled birds from the trees and scooped her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing and begging him to put her down. He did, but only so he could kiss her properly, pouring all his love and excitement and wonder into that kiss. "A baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Lily asked, though she must have known the answer from the ridiculous grin on his face. "Happy, Lily, I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was easy, or at least Lily claimed it was. Garrett worried constantly, fussing over her until she finally sat him down and told him firmly that she was growing a baby, not dying of some exotic disease. But he could not help it. After everything she had been through, the thought of anything happening to her or their child terrified him in a way nothing else ever had. Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1884, delivered by a midwife from Stevensville who arrived just in time despite the snow. Garrett paced outside the cabin like a caged mountain lion until he heard the baby's first cry, and then he burst through the door to find Lily propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, with a tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," she said softly, and Garrett approached on shaking legs. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Garrett reached out one calloused finger and let the baby grab it, amazed at the strength in that miniature grip. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is ours," Lily said, and when she looked up at Garrett, her eyes were full of tears. "I made this with you. I made something good and beautiful and innocent. After everything my father did to try and destroy me, I made life." Garrett sat carefully on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around both of them, his wife and his son, his whole world contained in that small space. "You are amazing, Lily Emerson. Absolutely amazing." They named him Gabriel, and he grew strong and healthy in the clean mountain air. By the time he was 2, Lily was pregnant again, and this time they welcomed a daughter with her mother's blue eyes and sunny disposition. They named her Margaret, after Garrett's mother. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, who was quieter than his siblings but no less loved. As their family grew, so did their homestead. Garrett added rooms to the cabin until it was a proper house with a real parlor and separate bedrooms for each child. He built that porch he had promised, wide and covered, where they would sit on summer evenings and watch their children play in the yard. The garden expanded until it produced more vegetables than they could eat, and Lily learned to can and preserve for the long winters. The small herd of cattle they had started with multiplied, and Garrett's reputation as a fair dealer and hard worker spread through the valley. They were not wealthy, not by any means, but they were comfortable and content and so deeply in love that their neighbors joked about it. Even after 10 years of marriage, Garrett still brought Lily wildflowers, and she still saved him the best biscuits at breakfast. They still stole kisses when they thought the children were not looking, and they still talked for hours after everyone else had gone to bed, sharing their hopes and dreams and fears. "Sometimes I think about that night," Lily said once, nestled in Garrett's arms on the porch swing he had built for their 15th anniversary. Their children were all asleep inside, and the valley was peaceful under a blanket of stars. "The night you heard me screaming." "I think about it too," Garrett admitted. "I think about what would have happened if I had been 5 minutes later leaving town, or if I had gone a different direction, or if I had decided it was not my business." Lily shuddered and pressed closer to him. "Do not think about that. You did hear me. You did come for me. You saved my life, Garrett." "No," Garrett said, tilting her face up to his. "We saved each other. You gave me a reason to stop drifting. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. I was just as lost as you were. I just did not know it until I found you." "Then I guess we are both lucky," Lily said, kissing him softly. "The luckiest," Garrett agreed. As the years passed, their children grew into fine young people who knew nothing of locked cellars and cruel fathers. Gabriel became a skilled horseman like his father, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch work. Margaret inherited her mother's strength and kindness, becoming a teacher in Stevensville. Thomas found his calling in medicine, heading east to study after he turned 18. Garrett and Lily watched them go with pride and sadness in equal measure, but they still had each other, and that had always been enough. They grew old together in the house they had built, their hair turning gray, their hands growing gnarled with age and work, but their love never fading. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the homestead for a celebration. There were dozens of them now, filling the house and spilling out into the yard, and the noise and chaos made Garrett laugh. He stood on the porch with Lily beside him, watching their legacy play out before them in the faces of children and grandchildren, who would never know the darkness that had once threatened to swallow Lily whole. "We did good," Lily said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We did," Garrett agreed. "We did real good." That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, they lay in the bed they had shared for 4 decades and held each other close. Outside, the Montana wind whispered through the valley, and somewhere far away, a coyote called to the moon. But inside, in that warm room filled with memories of a life well lived, there was only peace. "I love you, Lily Emerson," Garrett whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, Garrett Emerson," Lily whispered back. "Thank you for hearing me scream that night. Thank you for breaking me out. Thank you for showing me that life could be beautiful again." "Thank you for letting me," Garrett said, and he kissed her one more time, soft and sweet and full of promise. They had built something remarkable from the ashes of tragedy, a love story that started in the worst possible way and became something extraordinary. It was not always easy, and there were scars that never fully healed, but together they had proven that darkness could be defeated by light, that cruelty could be overcome by kindness, and that 2 broken people could make each other whole in the end. That was all that mattered. They had found each other, saved each other, and loved each other with everything they had. They had raised a family, built a home, and created a legacy that would outlive them both. And when they were very old and their time on earth was done, they would go together, hand in hand, into whatever came next, just as they had faced everything else in their long and beautiful life. But that time was still many peaceful years away. For now, there were grandchildren to spoil and crops to tend and endless summer evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their love story from the very beginning. There were still kisses to steal and stories to share and quiet moments of perfect contentment that needed no words at all. Garrett Emerson had been a drifter once, a man with no roots and no real purpose beyond survival. Then he had heard a woman screaming in a cellar, and everything changed. He had broken down those doors and pulled Lily Kensington into the light, never imagining that in saving her, he would save himself. And Lily, who had once been locked in the dark by her own father, had found a man who gave her wings instead of chains, who built her a home instead of a prison, who loved her not for what she could give him but simply for who she was. Together, they had proven that the human spirit was resilient beyond measure, that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions, and that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale but something real and attainable for those brave enough to fight for it. Their story was one of rescue and redemption, of trauma overcome and trust rebuilt, of two souls who found each other in the wild frontier and refused to let go. It was a testament to courage and compassion, to the power of one person's choice to do the right thing even when it would have been easier to walk away. And it was a reminder that sometimes, in the darkest moments, all it takes is one voice crying out in the night and one person willing to answer. Garrett had answered Lily's cry for help on that August evening in 1882, and she had spent the rest of her life showing him what that answer meant. She had given him children and laughter and purpose. She had transformed his restless wandering into peaceful belonging. She had made him a better man simply by loving him and letting him love her in return. As for Lily, she had learned that not all men were like her father, that some were gentle and good and true. She had discovered strengths within herself she never knew existed, forged in the crucible of suffering but tempered in the warmth of genuine love. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built something magnificent, refusing to let her past define her future. Their homestead in the Bitterroot Valley stood as a testament to what they had created together, a place of joy and safety where their family could flourish. The cabin that had started as 4 walls and a dream had become a home filled with memories, and the land they had claimed had become sacred ground, watered with their sweat and tears and laughter. Years would pass, seasons would change, and eventually their earthly journey would end. But the love they shared, the family they built, and the example they set would ripple forward through generations. Their grandchildren would tell their own children about the cowboy who heard a woman screaming and broke down the cellar doors to save her, and about the brave woman who refused to let cruelty extinguish her light. It was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, and a life worth living. From the darkest beginning came the brightest future, and from one moment of courage came a lifetime of happiness. Garrett and Lily Emerson had found each other in the Wild West, in a time and place where survival often meant looking the other way, and they had chosen differently. They had chosen love, and that choice had made all the difference.